A bag of lentils, a blender, and 5 minutes. That is all I need to brew the same molecule garden centers sell for $30 to $50 a bottle. The big chemical companies call it indole acid. Scientists like me call it auxin. My grandmother probably called it willow water. Two main things explain why almost nobody in the English-speaking world makes their own. One involves a plant hormone so strong it controls every root stem and fruit on this earth. The other involves a $4 billion industry that profits from keeping us in the dark. By the end of this video, I will show you my exact 5-minute recipe that turns simple sprouted lentils into a rooting hormone so powerful that science proves it actually beats the expensive products sitting on your shelf right now. But first, I want you to understand what auxin is and why this knowledge was hidden from us. If you've ever used rooting powder without knowing why, subscribe now, because I am about to change your whole perspective forever. You see that liquid inside the bottle is not some fancy modern invention. It is definitely not a massive breakthrough in agricultural chemistry. It is just a molecule that every plant on Earth already produces naturally. For ages, indigenous people knew how to extract it for free using only water and a lot of patience. Chemical companies simply figured out how to charge us for it. What you are learning will change how you view gardening and the products sitting in every garden center you visit. Because the story of auxin is not just a story about a hormone. It is a story of lost wisdom and how massive industries are built on things we can brew in our kitchens. My story begins back in 1880 inside a quiet greenhouse in Kent, England. Charles Darwin, the most famous biologist alive, had turned his focus toward a puzzle that completely stumped him. A simple canary grass seedling was bending itself toward the light. It wasn't the whole plant moving, just the very tip. Darwin and his son Francis designed a series of truly elegant experiments. They decided to cover the tip of the seedling with a tiny dark cap. The bending stopped instantly. They covered the lower stem instead, but left the tip wide open. The seedling kept bending. I've read how they tried this over and over using all sorts of different materials. The result was always exactly the same. Something was born at the tip and moved down, causing one side of the stem to grow faster than the other. Darwin simply called it an influence. He described it in his book The Power of Movement in Plants, published that year, alongside his son, Francis. They had no real idea what the substance was. They couldn't isolate it or prove if it was a chemical or an electrical signal. They just knew it existed, moved through the plant, and controlled life in ways nobody had documented before. That book laid the ground for our science. If you like this history, hit like for more gardening secrets. For decades after Darwin noticed this, scientists kept chipping away at the mystery. In 1913, Peter Boysen-Jensen inserted a thin slice of mineral into the stem of a grass seedling. When that mica blocked the shaded side of the stem, the plant stopped bending toward the light. When the mica blocked the lit side, the bending just kept going. His conclusion was truly extraordinary. Darwin's influence wasn't just moving downward. It was moving specifically down the dark, shaded side. A chemical was redistributing inside the plant, concentrating where it would cause the most growth. Still, Boysen-Jensen just could not quite capture the actual substance himself. That breakthrough finally arrived in 1926. A Dutch student named Fritz Wendt achieved what researchers had failed at for decades. I can see him in his father's lab at Utrecht University performing an experiment of breathtaking simplicity. He sliced the tips off oat seedlings and carefully placed them onto small blocks of agar gelatin. Then he waited. The tips released something completely invisible right into that gel. Next, he took those blocks, now loaded with the mysterious substance, and placed them onto the headless plant stumps. To his amazement, those seedlings resumed growing. When he placed those gel blocks off-center on the stump, the seedlings curved away as though the substance was physically pushing growth on one side. He had finally captured Darwin's invisible influence inside a small block of jelly. He named it auxin from the Greek word ausin, which literally means to grow. What Wendt had isolated was later identified as indole acetic acid, a molecule so vital that it has never been found absent from any living plant species. Not one. In 100 years of research, every single species ever tested has been found to produce its own auxin. For plants, this substance is just as universal as DNA itself. You and I are looking at a detail now that most people find absolutely astonishing. The very first auxin was not even isolated from a plant. It was actually first pulled directly from human urine. In 1934, Frits Kogel at Utrecht University extracted indole 3-acetic acid from human urine. That is the same place Wendt did his work. It was later found in yeast, in fungi, and eventually in every higher-order plant. This molecule was so common in biology that scientists just kept stumbling across it everywhere they looked. Kenneth Tiemann, one of the most prolific plant experts of the 20th century, spent many decades mapping exactly how this single molecule dictates every stage of plant development. His career, spanning from the 1930s to the 90s, proved that auxin is the most important signal in the plant kingdom. Let me explain what that means, because the scope of what auxin does is almost impossible to overstate. Every root you see pushing through soil only does so because auxin gave the order. When auxin pools at the base of a cutting, it literally reprograms ordinary stem cells at a genetic level to become root cells. I have seen reports from the University of California showing exactly how this acid activates specific genes, causing stem cells to change their identity and transform into roots. Every stem reaching for light bends because auxin gathers on the dark side, stretching those cells and pushing the plant toward the sun. Every piece of fruit ripening on a branch is doing so strictly under auxin's direct command. If I put auxin on an unfertilized tomato flower, it grows seedless fruit without any pollination. That is a process called parthenocarpy. Every wound that heals on a pruned tree happens because auxin rushes to the cut site and initiates cell division. When you pinch the top off a plant and it grows bushy, it happens because you removed the main auxin source, breaking what I call apical dominance, and allowing the side shoots to grow. One single molecule orchestrates every bit of it. This single molecule decides whether a plant develops roots or shoots, reaches for the light, or plunges into shadow, and whether it bears fruit. It is synthesized from tryptophan, the same amino acid found in turkey, through a pathway so ancient it predates flowering plants by hundreds of millions of years. Now, let's look at a turn in the story that the big garden industry would rather you and I didn't know. Long before Darwin used his magnifying glass or Wendt trapped hormones in gelatin, indigenous peoples already understood exactly what willow trees were capable of doing. Native Americans used willow bark as a powerful and effective medicine for many centuries. The Cherokee, Ojibwe, and Iroquois nations chewed the bark for pain and brewed it into tea. If you enjoy this history, please subscribe. Willows show up repeatedly in these ancient, traditional, and very effective remedies. An Egyptian medical text from 1500 years before the Common Era prescribed willow leaf poultices to fight inflammation. That is incredible. Around 400 years before the Common Era, Hippocrates recommended willow tea for the intense pains of childbirth. The secret was salicin, which our bodies convert into salicylic acid. If you like this video, leave a comment. In 1897, a Bayer chemist named Felix Hoffmann processed that acid into acetyl salicylic acid. The company simply called it aspirin. I've seen it become the most popular drug in the history of the world. Every year, if I stacked the tablets, they'd reach the moon and back. I watched aspirin launch a pharmaceutical empire worth billions. But here's something you and I never learned in school. I discovered willow trees hold more than just the aspirin precursor. They're packed with indole acid, I just call it IBA. It's the same compound I see sold as rooting hormone in garden stores. The exact same molecule. That $30 bottle of Clonex gel or that fancy Hormex powder, I've found it all drips freely from a simple willow twig when I soak it in warm water overnight. These trees are so hormone-rich, I find them among the easiest plants on Earth to grow. I can literally shove a branch into wet dirt and watch it become a tree. I've seen restoration crews hammer stakes into muddy banks, and they sprout roots within weeks without any human help at all. To me, the tree is just a hormone delivery system wrapped in bark. Native Americans didn't use the word auxin, but when they pushed willow stakes into riverbanks and watched those roots explode from the wood, I know they understood the principle perfectly. When they soaked bundles of willow twigs to help their seedlings establish, they were brewing a complex indole-butyric acid solution without ever needing to know the formal chemistry. I know that knowledge was never truly lost. It just wasn't profitable enough for me or anyone else to package and sell. I spent time reading about Dr. Wayne Armstrong, who documented every species of Salix, which is the genus for all North American willows. He found them growing right near major universities and garden centers that were busy selling the synthetic versions of the same molecule. Those same trees were producing the stuff for free. To me, the irony is just extraordinary. Botany students could have walked to a pond, collected a few willow twigs, steeped them overnight, and produced their own functional rooting hormone. Instead, I saw them drive to the store and pay $30 for a synthetic version of the same compound. Let's look at a detail the industry never tells us. I've found willow water provides something that synthetic acid just can't match. Salicylic acid in the willow triggers a defense in my plants called systemic acquired resistance. Once my cuttings soak up that acid, they activate immune pathways to fight off nasty infections. This is vital because I've found the biggest killer isn't a lack of hormones. It's simply rot. I've lost more cuttings to fungus than to a simple failure to produce roots. My willow water fix solves both problems simultaneously. I get the hormonal signal to grow roots and an immune boost to keep them alive while they develop. No commercial rooting powder or gel I've found can combine both functions at the molecular level the way willow water does naturally. Meanwhile, far to the south, I discovered farming communities in Latin America found something just as amazing from a different source. Just plain lentils. In countries like Chile, Argentina, and Mexico, I've seen small farmers use sprouted lentils as a natural rooting hormone for many generations. They call it enrizante de lentejas, which to me means lentil rooting agent. I found this technique in Spanish agricultural literature, permaculture handbooks, and on countless gardening forums dating back for decades. To me, the science behind it is elegant and very well understood. I know that when any seed germinates, its biggest priority is to grow a root. To do this, I watch the seed flood itself with auxins. I see the hormonal balance of the seed tip heavily toward promoting its roots. I've noticed auxin concentrations peak right at the moment of sprouting when tiny white root tips first emerge from the seed coat. That is the exact moment the seed produces the maximum amount of the same hormone that commercial companies synthesize in factories and sell to me in little bottles. Stick with me because I've found lentils are ideal for a few specific reasons. I've found they germinate fast, usually within 2 to 4 days at room temperature. I noticed they ferment much less than other legumes like beans or peas, so there's no nasty bacteria or foul smells during the process. They are really cheap, and I can find them at basically any grocery store on the planet. Most importantly, they release their auxins right into the water, making it super easy for me to extract them. I didn't need a chemistry lab. I didn't need special equipment either. I just soak, sprout, blend, and strain them. Suddenly, I'm holding a powerful natural auxin solution right in my hand. If you are thinking this sounds far too simple to actually work, or just too good to be a real alternative, let me show you the science. This isn't just some old folklore I found. It's not a gardening myth I saw on some random internet forum without any real proof. We are talking peer-reviewed, statistically analyzed, and fully published data. I looked at a 2025 study in horticulture, a journal in the MDPI database, that tested a lentil rooter against Rhizo Plus. The way they set up the experiment was incredibly rigorous. They used 5 different treatment groups. They tested various lentil concentrations alongside the chemical agent and a simple water control. They even used Fisher's least significant differences test to make sure the results were statistically sound. Believe me, the results were not subtle at all. They were absolutely dramatic. Compared to plain water, the lentil biorooter at its highest dose of 75 milliliters per application boosted plant height by 166%. It also increased the root length by 165%. The number of leaves shot up by 113%. The total mass of the plant above ground increased by 169%. Even the dry weight of the roots went up by 116%. If you're enjoying these garden secrets, hit subscribe. Now check out this next number that every gardener should notice. Female flower production, the ones that actually turn into fruit, increased by 177%. Now I want you to compare that to the commercial chemical they tested in that same study. The lentil treatment actually beat Rhizoplus in almost every single category they measured. Plant height was 13% higher using lentils than it was with the expensive commercial product. The leaf count beat the chemical treatment by a staggering 124%. Both fresh and dry weight topped the chemical by 103 and 107%, respectively. Root dry weight beat it by 117%. And female flower production outperformed the chemical by 160%. Just think about that again. A handful of kitchen lentils blended in water beat a fancy chemical product made in a high-tech lab. The researchers concluded that these lentil rooters are a perfect eco-friendly alternative to the standard chemical stuff. And that wasn't the only study I found on this. At the Royal Botanic Garden in Edinburgh, one of the most prestigious botanical institutions in the world, researchers compared natural hormones from lentils to synthetic chemicals. They tested it on a threatened conifer species from the rainforests of Chile and Argentina called Saxagothea conspicua. They took 80 semi-ripe cuttings and split them into different treatment groups. The study in the journal Sibaldia measured the exact auxin content in the homemade solutions and tracked how well they actually rooted. If you're finding this useful, drop a comment below. The study confirmed these natural mixes have real rooting power. But wait, if this molecule is so fundamental, so well documented in the scientific literature, and so clearly effective, why does a multi-billion-dollar industry sell it synthetically? I found that the answer boils down to three main factors that all work together. The first factor is all about concentration and consistency. A product like Clonex Gel gives you exactly 3,000 parts per million of acid every time you open that bottle. Chỉ sợ đó không hề thay đổi dù là từ mẹ này sang mẹ khác, mùa này sang mùa khác hay giữa các chai thuốc. Một mẹ nước liệu tôi tự nấu tại nhà có thể chữa từ 200 đến 2.000 phần triệu dưỡng chất tùy thuộc giống liệu tuổi cành và thời gian ngâm. Các nhà vườn nhân giống 10.000 cành hồng chắc chắn không thể mạo hiểm với sự bấp bênh như vậy được. Thế nên họ tạo ra các công thức tổng hợp rồi khiến tôi tin mình cần sự chính xác tuyệt đối như trong phòng thí nghiệm. Thật ra tôi chẳng cần đến thế đâu. Thứ hai là tạo ra vẻ ngoài đầy phức tạp. Ngành hóa chất hột bạc khi biến việc trồng cây đơn giản thành một thứ gì đó đầy kỹ thuật và gây e ngại. Khi tôi cầm chai thuốc ghi các axit hay hỗn hợp độc quyền, tôi thường mặc định mình cần kiến thức chuyên sâu của chuyên gia mới giúp cây ra rẽ. Nhưng thực tế thì không hề. Tôi chỉ cần hắc đầu lăng và nước, nhưng đầu lăng và cốc nước thì nhìn chẳng giống kỹ thuật làm vườn chuyên nghiệp gì cho cấm. Trông nói như tôi đang chuẩn bị cơm trưa. Mà chẳng ai đi xây dựng một đế chế tỷ đô toàn cầu chỉ dựa trên việc nấu cơm hàng ngày cả. Thứ ba, lỗ hổng kiến thức này nằm ở địa lý. Mẹo kích rẽ từ đầu lăng vốn là kiến thức phổ thông trong cộng đồng làm vườn nói tiếng Tây Ban Nha. Tìm Henry Zante để lên TH trên diễn đàn tiếng Tây Ban Nha, bạn sẽ thấy hàng ngàn bài hướng dẫn rất chi tiết. Nhưng tìm bằng tiếng Anh thì trước đây tôi gần như chẳng thấy thông tin nào ích lợi cả. Kỹ thuật này dường như đã bị kẹt trong điểm mù. Hàng triệu người không biết thuốc 30 đô hộ mua nằm trong bếp giá 30 xu, hãy đăng ký kênh để xem thêm mèo nhé. Những con số thị trường sẽ cho thấy rõ. Thị trường điều hòa sinh trưởng thực vật đạt khoảng 4,5 tỷ đô la vào năm 2023. Riêng màng hormone kích rẽ đã đạt 1,21 tỷ đô vào năm 2024. Ở các tập đoàn lớn như Bayer hay BASF đang thống trị hoàn toàn thị trường này. Lợi nhuận từ auxin tổng hợp rất lớn vì nguyên liệu sản xuất chúng cực kỳ rẻ tiền. Công thức được bảo vệ bằng thương hiệu thay vì bằng sáng chế cho chính các phân tử đó. Họ đã huấn luyện để tôi tin rằng mình không thể nhân giống cây thành công nếu thiếu hàng mua sẵn ở tiệm. Hãy cùng tôi xem xét bài toán kinh tế. Một chai gel 15 đến 20 đô la tại các cửa hàng làm vườn ở khắp nơi. Thành phần chính tồn chưa tới vài xu để tổng hợp quy mô công nghiệp lớn. Số tiền còn lại chỉ cho bao bì tiếp thị phân phối và cả lợi nhuận của họ nữa. Trong khi đó, chỉ cần $1 đầu lăng ở tiệm tạp hóa là tôi đã có đủ nước kích rẻ dùng cho hàng chục lần thực hiện. Hoặc chỉ một cây liệu thôi cũng cho tôi đủ cành để làm nước kích rẻ miễn phí từ mùa này sang mùa khác mà không tồn xứ nào. Sự chênh lệch về giá không phải là 10 hay 50% đâu, mà nó lên tới vài nghìn. Sản phẩm của họ đúng là có hiệu quả thật. Cơ sở khoa học của nó cũng hoàn toàn đúng. Nhưng giá cao vì bạn không biết, mẹo miễn phí, hãy thích video nếu thầy hữu ích. Câu chuyện này không chỉ riêng với hormone. Tôi thấy mô típ này lặp đi lặp lại trong cả ngành công nghiệp làm vườn. Những lời khuẩn tự nhiên vốn có trong đất khỏe mạnh giờ lại được đóng gói để mang đi bán. Trà ủ phân mà tôi tự làm được tại nhà lại bị họ biến thành hàng độc quyền. Vi khuẩn rừng bị xay khô, rồi dán nhãn bán giá trên trời, tôi thấy điều này thật sự rất vô lý. Họ chỉ muốn tách tôi ra khỏi những kiến thức tự nhiên để bắt tôi phải bỏ tiền túi ra mua sản phẩm của họ. Như tôi đã hứa đây là cách làm. Dưới đây là công thức chi tiết từng bước cho bạn hãy làm cùng tôi nhé. Tôi chuẩn bị 100 g hạt đậu lăng khô. Lượng này tẩm nửa bát ăn cơm thôi nhé. Loại nào cũng dùng được cả. Tôi dùng đầu nâu xanh hay đỏ đều được miễn là còn nguyên hạt và bạn hãy nhấn like ủng hộ tôi nhé. Đừng dùng loại đau tách vỡ, vì chúng không thể nảy mầm. Tôi cần chuẩn bị thêm hũ thủy tinh vai màn, một cái rầy lốc máy sấy sinh tố cùng với nước sạch. Chỉ bấy nhiêu thôi nhé. Bước 1, tôi chỗ đầu vào hũ rồi đổ thêm 400ml nước sạch vào trong đó. Tôi để đầu ngâm trong 8 tới 12 tiếng. Qua đêm là tốt nhất. Lúc này các enzyme trong hạt bắt đầu thức tỉnh. Mầm đầu bắt đầu nảy nở. Lượng oxin tự nhiên tăng mạnh. Bước 2, chất nước ra và nhỏ giữ lại. Nước đó chứa rất nhiều oxin cùng dưỡng chất quý. Tôi phủ vai kín để giữ độ ấm và tránh ánh sáng. Tôi để hũ đầu cho ấm. Nhiệt độ phòng là ổn rồi. Mỗi ngày 2 lần tôi tưới chút nước ngâm cửu để giữ ấm. Chắt sạch nước ngay nhé. Hắt đầu căng ấm chứ không được úng. Bước 3, tôi đổ vài ngày. Những chiếc rễ trắng nhỏ bắt đầu nhú ra khỏi hạt. Lúc này oxin đạt đỉnh cao nhất. Hạt đầu dần hết năng lượng để nuôi dưỡng bộ rễ đó. Chính là lúc thu hoạch. Bước 4, tôi cho đầu nảy mầm vào máy xay cùng nước cũ và thêm một bát nước sạch. Hãy nhận đăng ký nhé. Tôi xay cho hỗn hợp thật mịn. Xay càng kỳ tôi càng thu được nhiều oxin từ các tế bào đầu. Bước 5, tôi lọc hỗn hợp qua tấm vải màn. Ép thật mạnh để lấy hết phần tinh chất quý giá. Nước đực này là oxin đậm đặc của tôi. Bã thưa tôi đem u phân. Tôi và các bạn hãy xem mèo này để công thức mạnh hơn. Tôi thường thêm một nhúm bột què vào phần dung dịch đã được pha loãng trước khi dùng. Quẻ không có oxin nhưng trồng nằm cực hiệu quả. Nó giúp ngăn chặn tình trạng thồi rẽ vốn là nguyên nhân chính thường xuyên gây chết cây. Tôi coi lớp bột quẻ này chính là chất bảo vệ cho vết cắt. Tôi cũng thường cho thêm một thìa mật ong nguyên chất vào. Mật ong có tính kháng khuẩn cao, đóng vai trò như chất bịt kín tự nhiên, giúp ngăn mầm bệnh xâm nhập trong khi oxin kích thích rễ phát triển. Hãy chia sẻ video. Khi dùng tôi pha 1 phần tinh chất với 10 phần nước. Tỷ lệ này cực kỳ quan trọng. Oxin phản ứng theo liều lượng 2 pha. Nồng độ thấp mới giúp kích rễ tốt. If I use it at high concentrations, it kills growth and plant tissue. I find that a 1 to 10 dilution is the sweet spot. I soak the base of my cuttings in this solution for 2 to 8 hours. I also water my seedlings with it to boost their root development. I store the pure concentrate in a sealed bottle in the fridge. It stays effective for about 15 days. If I lack lentils but have access to a willow tree, I have an equally powerful option with a bonus advantage for my garden. I find young branches ideally first-year growth with green or yellow bark. I cut 10 to 15 pieces each, about 12 to 18 inches long. I chop or crush them into 1-inch segments. I place them in a bucket and pour boiling water over them. I let the mixture steep overnight for at least 12 hours. The water turns a yellowish-brown color. I strain out the twigs. That liquid is packed with indolebutyric acid and salicylic acid. This auxin really stimulates my root growth. The salicylic acid triggers resistance in plant tissue, acting as a natural antifungal and protecting my cuttings from the rot and infection that kills so many before they root. It is a 2-in-1 formula nature designed over millions of years. You and I can use a natural combo that no store product mimics. First, I brew my willow water. I use that water as the base when blending my sprouted lentils. I get auxin from 2 sources plus antifungal protection. I dilute it 1 to 10 as before. No store product offers that combination at any price. I know permaculture communities discovered these tricks years ago. In community gardens I visit, lentil rooting solution is standard practice. I watched farmers in Chile root grape cuttings with lentils and patience. Organic gardeners I know in Spain grow rosemary and olives with willow water recipes their grandparents taught them. I see homesteaders root fig cuttings and pomegranate branches using these methods, reaching success rates they never achieved with store-bought powders. In the aquaponics world, I see willow water used differently. I watch fish farmers maintain root health in their growing beds. Salicylic acid prevents root disease while the auxin boosts nutrient uptake. I see tilapia operations use willow-infused water as a regular supplement. I have discovered that feeding spent lentil sprout pulp to my chickens adds protein and micronutrients to their diet, meaning nothing from this process goes to waste. Even the byproduct has value. I see urban gardeners adapt this for small-scale growing. A single mason jar of sprouting lentils on my kitchen counter produces enough rooting concentrate to treat dozens of my cuttings. I clone basil, rosemary, and thyme from a single purchased plant, building an entire herb garden for the cost of one grocery store herb container. I take cuttings from heirloom roses, soak them in lentil water overnight, and find rooting rates above 70% on stems that previously failed with commercial powder. A community I know in Tucson has been growing desert fig trees from cuttings using willow and lentil water for 3 years. Sharing starts at neighborhood plant swaps is how I effectively build a local food forest from kitchen scraps and free knowledge. This technique goes way beyond just ornamental gardening. You and I should notice how small farmers in developing countries use lentil rooting water to grow cassava and sweet potatoes crops that form the backbone of their food security. I know these farmers cannot afford commercial rooting hormones, but you and I know a bag of lentils costs nothing and does the job. To me, the implications for food sovereignty are absolutely enormous. Any community with access to lentils or a willow tree has professional-grade technology at their fingertips. I want to be honest about the limitations because my credibility matters more than hype. Softwood cuttings like my basil and tomatoes root in plain water without me lifting a finger. These little plants are basically natural auxin factories all on their own. My pothos cuttings pump out so much auxin that the water actually benefits other nearby plants. This is where my homemade solutions shine on semi-hardwood stems like rosemary and lavender. Their woodier stems mean slower growth, so I give them a boost to see faster success. Now I will admit that hardwood cuttings from mature trees are my toughest challenge. Species like cherry or apple have evolved tough bark that makes it hard for me. I find that some of these still respond well to my natural auxin mix. Others genuinely need the high, precisely calibrated doses found in synthetic commercial products, levels reaching 5,000 to 8,000 parts per million that I simply cannot achieve reliably in my own kitchen. I would never tell you that lentil water is a magic fix for every plant. But it handles almost everything in my garden for free, and science actually backs me up. I have one more safety note: auxin is a real hormone that works in tiny amounts. If I use too much, I might see weird growth, curled leaves, or even cell death. I always make sure to stick to my 1:10 dilution ratio. I never ever put the raw concentrate directly onto my cuttings. And I never dump these solutions into drains or out in the wild areas. Too much auxin can really mess up the growth of native plants in our local waterways. I just compost my leftovers or dilute them to water the bigger plants I have. Commercial interest is exploding, so hit like to keep these gardening secrets free and available. This market hit $1.24 billion in 2024 and is growing fast. I see companies rushing to package these organic products and sell them at premium prices. They are essentially selling me what gardeners in Latin America have done for free for ages. Secrets that were shared for free on forums are now being branded and sold at markups. It is a pattern I have seen throughout the entire history of our agriculture. Ancient wisdom gets a thumbs up from science, then big business swoops in to own it. But here's the one thing the garden industry never wanted me to figure out. The most powerful rooting stuff on Earth is not hidden behind some patent or price tag. It is made naturally by every single germinating seed on this entire planet. It is right there in every willow twig, proven by science, and available for almost nothing. Even Charles Darwin saw it happening way back in 1880. Then Fritz Wendt actually captured it in 1926. But Native Americans knew this secret long before those men were even born. Farmers from Spain to Argentina have used it for generations to keep their crops growing. That $4 billion plant hormone industry is not selling me something rare. They are selling me something that is literally everywhere I look. It is just a fancy bottle with a scientific name designed to make me feel helpless. I can make it myself in 5 minutes for less than a single dollar. That old willow tree in my neighbor's yard already knows the truth. Even the dry lentils in my pantry know the secret. And now you and I know it too. If this helped your garden, check out my next video and do not forget to subscribe. I will see you in the next one.